Hi, I'm Chuck Braverman. This is another episode of Westdoc Online. Today we have, again, one of the nominees for Best Feature Doc for the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. The film is called Navalny. It's on HBO Max. Definitely should take a look at it. It's a fabulous film, and we have the director. But before we begin, I just want to remind you we're brought to you in part by Real Screen Summit. The new Real Screen West is coming up June 6th through 8th in Dana Point, California. Again, I was there last year. It was great. I just got back from Real Screen Summit in Austin. The best part about Real Screen is something that's not really featured on their webpage, but it's meeting other people in the business that do what you do, or they're buyers or sellers or whatever. And you go and you sit down at lunch or breakfast or in any of the panels, and you sit next to somebody, you don't know who they are, what they are. And I'm telling you, this is the most valuable thing about going to any conference, is networking and meeting terrific people, of which I met several great people at Real Screen. And I want to thank them for being a sponsor of the show. So today we have Daniel Roher on, who is the director of Navalny. Hi, Daniel. How are you?
Hanging in there, Chuck. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Where are you speaking from?
I'm in Los Angeles, California, in my kitchen.
Oh, so why? So have you moved here? I thought you were from Toronto.
I am from Toronto and I live in Toronto, but my wife lives in Los Angeles. So I'm here holding down the fort while she's away.
So to be clear, I'll tell you I like Toronto very much, actually. I've gone to hot docs probably 10 times in the last 12 or 15 years. And I think it's the best documentary film festival in the world, and certainly in North America. And it amazes me every time that I go there that you can go to a big city like Toronto that has, I don't know how many, several million people living there, and you can put up 100 films in whatever number of days that they're on, and 150,000 people they can sell tickets to. And last time I was there, it was a couple of years ago, it was like $10 a pop. And I don't know why we don't do that in LA or New York. I mean, they do. There are festivals, of course, all over, but I think the Toronto Hot Docs is just the best, in my opinion, and I love going there, and I'm looking forward
That's
to
so
going.
wonderful for you to say, Chuck. I grew up at the Hot Docs Film Festival when I was 17 years old. The singular goal of my life was to get a film programmed at the Hot Docs Film Festival, which I have since done, and then some.
So before we get into Navalny, you're a relatively speaking young filmmaker, and you've done 2 feature films. And I must say, Once We're Brothers with Robbie Robertson and the band is probably one of the best overall docs there is out there, and certainly one of the top 3 or 4 best musical docs of all time. I watched it again a week ago before doing this show, and I can't tell you how much I enjoyed the show, what a fabulous job you did, and I'm still stunned. I mean, like, how the heck did you, as a young, newish filmmaker, get Martin Scorsese and Brian Grazer and Ron Howard to be executive producers for a film that you were directing about the band?
Well, Chuck, that's so kind of you to say. To hear you say that it's one of the best music docs of all time is pretty crazy to me. I don't even think it's the best doc about the band, but I appreciate it. The famous fancy guys just put their names on the film as a favor to Robbie. It's not as if I was some fancy operator who could make things happen. It was very much Robbie calling up his close friend Martin Scorsese and saying, "Hey, we're doing this doc. Can you be the executive producer?" And Scorsese said, "All right." That was the first part. And then we were one of the first documentaries out of the gate at Imagine Documentaries, which was a new sort of wing of Brian Grazer and Ron Howard's company. So that's how those 2 guys got involved.
Well, I'm being completely sincere when I say I really enjoyed it. Maybe part of it was you picked the right guy to feature in Robbie Robertson, because there's something magical about his telling the story of the band. And in a way, he's relaxed, he's calm, he's clear, he's concise, and he's a very good guide. And the story, even at the end, it unfortunately has that, that classic rock and roll story of, except in the case of the band, of course, they were super group with superstars, but it was sort of sad to see how a couple of them ended up after the fact.
I think it's the profound tragedy of reaching fame at a young age. Oftentimes, those men and women are not endowed with the life skills of how to cope with that situation. And I think that very much speaks to the case of the band.
Yeah. And their music was so wonderful. And I have a renewed appreciation for Robbie Robertson and the band after rewatching the film, which I enjoyed very much the first time I saw it. So now, again, just before we get into it, what is your background and how did you get started in film? Where did you go to school? How did you get to this point?
Well, my background is that I am a Jew from Canada. I grew up in Toronto, and both my Jewishness and my Canadianness are important parts of my background. My parents were in the schmutta business. They had clothing stores in town. And I developed an early love of fine arts and cinema and movies and comic books and these sorts of things. And I really liked drawing and painting, and those were early passions of mine. I graduated from high school, this great art school in Toronto. But then shortly thereafter, I went to this school called the Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia. And I was there for about a year before I dropped out because I thought that college was not very interesting. And I wasn't learning very much. And I wanted to go do other stuff. So I left and ventured out into the world with aspirations of making documentaries. And this was around the same time when you could plausibly go make a film with, a backpack and a DSLR and this sort of thing. And I made a few films like that. And over the course of a few years, working very, very hard, I rose the ranks in Canada. I made a few short films there that people saw and that got a little bit of attention. But it wasn't until I bamboozled my way into the Robbie Robertson project that I was able to take my career to the next stratosphere. And then I made Navalny, which changed my life.
So let's take a look at the trailer, right?
Okay, so Alexei, I want to talk about something that we sort of touched on this morning. And you might hate this, but I really want you to think about it. If you are killed, if this does happen, what message do you leave behind to the Russian people?
Alexei Navalny has taken on the most dangerous job in the world, challenging the leader of the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin.
If I want to be a leader of this country, if I want to fight Putin, I have to organize people.
Война в Украине и война в Сирии. Я прекращу войну.
The Kremlin hates Navalny so much, they refuse to say his name.
I was banned from everything and blacklisted. But as I became more and more famous, I was totally sure that it will be problematic for them to kill me.
And boy, were you wrong.
Yes, I was very wrong.
Alexei Navalny arrives at this hospital in Berlin.
To have your dad, an opposition leader, being poisoned, it was literally like a book.
Come on, poisoned? Seriously?
We were so shocked. It's like Putin's leaving a signature on a crime scene.
It's kind of stupid.
We found a domestic assassination machine on an industrial scale.
Navalny will personally call his poisoners one by one.
Это Навальный, Алексей, вас беспокоит. Хотел узнать, зачем вы хотели меня убить.
Oh my God, you ruined their day.
Navalny is stepping into a showdown with the Kremlin.
I want to go back and try to change Russia.
It's something worth fighting for.
Are you not scared, Alexei?
Поэтому бездействовать не надо.
How has it changed your life?
Well, the success of the Navalny film, I think, has catapulted my life to places that I never thought possible. Because of the Navalny film, I met my wife. I now have a deep well of options in terms of what I can do next. What's the next film I can make? And it's a real honor to get to work on a film with such consequence that matters so much, that is so timely and important. And that is all very painful for me because I feel a great deal of guilt associated with all the things I just spoke to, because Navalny is languishing in solitary confinement. He's being tortured in a gulag while I am doing interviews all day, very, very comfortably, and thinking about how my life has expanded and how I have so many opportunities while he is languishing.
Well, so let's skip to the chase for a moment. Did you ever have a conversation with him and say, what the hell are you thinking? Why in the world would you go back there when you know they've already tried to kill you? And maybe you shouldn't go?
No, I think that would have been a pretty low IQ conversation to have with him, even though it sounds pretty obvious. I think he just frames this as his destiny, and he has maybe a little savior complexy thing going on, but he wanted to go back, and he framed himself as the moral leader of the Russian people, and he wanted to set an example, and he wanted to show the Russian people that they don't have to be afraid, and he wanted to demonstrate that through his actions and his courage. I don't know if he made the right decision, but I think about him all the time, and I can't help but feel melancholy and sadness for all the things he's missing, being where he is now. You spend time with his wife and his children, you get to know his family, and it really makes you wonder whether or not he did the right thing. But at the end of the day, that decision that you're speaking to was between him and his higher power.
I suspect there's no way to communicate with him now, right?
It's really difficult to communicate with him. Navalny no longer has attorney-client privilege. He cannot communicate with the outside world freely, so there's no way for me to communicate with him. I think he's sometimes able to exchange letters with his wife and his daughter, and I know that he's able to get messages out to the world via his lawyers, but that's the extent of it.
Are you in touch with his wife?
Yeah, actually, I spend a great deal of time with Dasha and Yulia. We were last in Park City together when the film was playing at Sundance a few weeks ago, and I think they put on a brave face. I think that they try and have the appearance of strength for the world, but I think that they are very much struggling. You can only imagine how painful it must be to endure what they are enduring. They miss their father, they miss their husband, and it must be all the more painful to know that not only is he in prison, but he is being tortured in prison. He is in a very challenging spot, and the prison authorities are unrelenting and brutal.
This isn't comparable at all, but I went to Russia back in the mid-'70s to do pre-production on a show that eventually never happened. But I had a contact there, a guy who lived in Moscow, and he was Jewish. He was a first AD, assistant director, and he spoke English. And so somebody gave me his name and phone number. And when I was in the National Hotel across the street from the Kremlin, I picked up the phone and called him. And it was a very brief conversation. He said, be out in front of the hotel tomorrow at 7 p.m. Click, and hung up. So I walked out, and literally, it was like a spy movie from the 50s, a bad movie. And I followed him back to his house, and he could not have been nicer and more friendly. And he had been all around the world as a film AD. And I said, so why are you still here? You're Jewish in Russia in 1975 or 6, whatever it was. He says, because I'm Russian, Mother Russia. This is my homeland. I don't want to leave. And it sort of struck me as, like how committed he was to stay there. I don't know, and that was a long time ago. I don't know if he eventually ever did leave or not. But I kind of get Navalny to some degree. But so you want to tell the story of how you got involved in this film? You were working on something else with your producers, and this sort of fell in front of you, or tell us the brief version, please.
Yeah, well, I was working on a different film with Christo Grozev. We were in Vienna, Austria. We were in Kiev, working on a film there. It wasn't going well, and we were asked to leave the country, or not asked, but encouraged to leave the country, I'd say. And we found ourselves sitting in Vienna, trying to figure out what to do next. And that's when Christo started looking into the Navalny poisoning. And he found a lead and was able to reach out to Alexei and say, hey, I found a lead. I know who tried to poison you. We were able to go and meet with Alexei, and I had the opportunity to pitch him on a film project. Thankfully, that pitch went well, and he was receptive to the idea, and we started filming shortly thereafter.
Do you know if he ever saw the band movie, or did he just do it on a gut instinct in a meeting with you?
Gut instinct. Yeah, he never saw the band movie. He didn't know who the band was.
Wow. And so there's one of the more dramatic sequences in the film is Navalny picking up the phone at the table with 3 or 4 of his compatriots and making the phone call to the FSB, which is their, Secret Service type guys. And the first one, I think, he said, this is Alex Navalny. Why did you try and poison me, or something to that effect? And the guy hung up. But then he pretended to be somebody else, right? And had this amazing conversation. Were you sitting there in shock when that happened? I mean, he obviously was.
Well, I was filming, so I had to stay very, very focused. But we knew immediately that something extraordinary was transpiring. I mean, the look on the faces of everybody in that room, you could feel this quite overt sense of, holy shit. I think that's the best way to describe it. But I don't speak Russian, so I didn't exactly know what they were saying. I just knew that they were saying something juicy, and that whatever we were filming was very important, not just for our film, but for the Russian public. I understood just by the facial expressions of my colleagues that this was revelatory and extraordinary. And so, yeah, we just sat there, and it was crazy.
And at what point did CNN get involved? Was it before or after that? And how did they get involved?
It was after that, and they got involved because everyone else was too frightened to get involved, I think. Any of the major players whom you might expect to get involved were very, very scared and apprehensive, and they didn't want to take on the government. They were scared, and there were lawyers who wouldn't work on the movie, and this is what the Russians want to happen. So when we found an outlet, a company that had a spine and a backbone in CNN, we immediately understood that they would be valuable partners for us by virtue of their courage alone.
Well, that says a lot of good things about CNN, doesn't it? And
yeah, it sure does. And recently, CNN Films ceased to be,
I know.
and they no longer exist. And it's a tremendous loss for everyone in this industry, anyone who cares about intrepid investigative films and things like this. They were the only ones who had the courage to be part of this film. So their loss is deeply sad. And when I think of what Courtney Sexton and Amy Antelis and Alex Hannibal, Ryan Robson, the women who ran CNN Films, what they created and all the amazing films that they made, it's a awful tragedy that they are no longer.
Were they involved, or to what extent were they involved in the post-production, if at all, in terms of finishing the film?
Well, I mean, they were the studio on record, so they were, gave notes and things like this, but that was pretty much the extent of it. I found the executives at CNN Films, led by Courtney Sexton, who's now a participant, to be fantastic. Very smart notes. Sometimes executive notes can be very stupid and low IQ notes. But CNN, all of their notes were really thoughtful and well constructed. And even the ones that I was apprehensive to or that I was allergic to ended up being very, very smart and encouraged me to get out of my own way. So I only have good things to say about the women who were in charge of CNN Films. They did a remarkable job and supported us from the very first moment.
And can you tell us a little bit, because there are a lot of filmmakers that like to watch these episodes and they want to know about the actual making of the film. What was the post-production process like? How long did it take? How much footage, how many hours of footage do you think you had? And what was the process for you?
Well, I think that the biggest headline of the post-process was the fact that we had to edit the film and make the film in a veil of total secrecy, which can be very challenging for someone like me. It's not good at keeping secrets. But we did everything we could to keep the production safe. We edited offline. We used encrypted hard drives. We only communicated on encrypted channels. We didn't send emails. Everyone who had to know or work on the project, of course, was in NDA land. And we kept moving the edit around. It was in Toronto for a bit, where I'm from. Then we were in Los Angeles, and then we were in London, then we were back in Los Angeles. And so it really just became a game of trying to get the film done as quickly as possible. I cannot say enough good things about the two editors of the film, Langdon Page and Maya Daisy Hawk. Langdon and Maya did an extraordinary job navigating my own anxiety and ego and all of these factors that really impact the working dynamic. And at the end of the day, and at the end of the day, they taught me the very valuable lesson that to make a really, really good film, the director has to get out of their own way and understand that their own ideas may not be the best ones, and have the flexibility of mind and character to know that other ideas might be better, and to embrace them and accept them, and to understand that not having the best idea isn't necessarily a liability, but being able to accept other people's ideas is in fact a great source of strength. And that's probably the greatest lesson that I learned from working with my two terrific editors.
Well, that's a good lesson. Are you concerned at all about your well-being in relation to working on this film? Do you feel like you've poked the Russian bear?
Yes, absolutely we have. It's no question. I take solace in the fact that the Russians are morons, as evidenced by our film. You expect the Russian security services to be like James Bond. They're not. They're pretty incompetent. And that's very clear if you watch the movie. So I do take solace in that. And I also understand that I'm not specifically targeted. They don't have a fatwa on my head. But I certainly worry for my colleagues for whose lives are very much in danger. It's well known at this point that Christo Grozev, one of the subjects of the film, is the only foreign national to have been placed on Russia's most wanted list. It's very clear that the Russian government is trying to assassinate him. is trying to murder him, and he lives in a constant state of danger. So I don't think they're going to come after me, but I spent a lot of time next to Christo, and collateral damage is certainly possible. But, you know, it is what it is. This is what happens, I guess, when you do the type of work that Christo does, and I would want to support him in that effort. Recently, he was disinvited from attending the BAFTA ceremony, which he was very disappointed about because of a security risk. The British police were concerned about the security situation. And that really, in my mind, plays into the hands of the Putins of the world who seek to make the lives of journalists who speak truth to power difficult and inconvenient. And although not going to an award ceremony is not the end of the world, it's troubling and a disappointing trend and sad for Christo's son, who is very excited to go, and so on and so forth.
Are you looking forward to going to the Oscar ceremony?
I'm getting married a few weeks after, so I'm more looking forward to that. I am very, very much looking. I guess I'm looking forward to it. You know, I'm struggling with it though, Chuck, to be totally honest, because as I alluded to earlier, all of the hoopla and excitement that is generated at this moment is predicated on this guy I care about being tortured in a gulag, solitary confinement. So whilst I am endlessly grateful for the nomination and all the recognition that comes with it, the whole experience is colored by the reality of where Alexei Navalny is. So I keep things in perspective. I keep things in check, and I view everything through a lens that is very much bittersweet, I think, is how I would. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't want to seem ungrateful because the recognition is extraordinary. But the recognition isn't for me. It's for Navalny and keeping his name in the global consciousness. And whenever I have the opportunity to talk in front of people, I just remind people of Navalny and his struggle. Whether you agree with his politics or not, whether you find him controversial or not, the man is being tortured in a gulag. He's not allowed to see his family. And we can all agree that that is a horrendous injustice that needs to be corrected. So the Oscars are exciting, but they only matter to me because they bring a great deal of attention to Navalny's plight and his cause and his name. And I believe that that has the potential to help his longevity. Today, Alexei Navalny is the loudest anti-war advocate in Russia. Anytime he appears in court, for example, instead of taking the time to defend himself, he stands up and decries this war, rallies against this war and the corrupt murderers for whom are waging it. And for that, Navalny is being tortured in prison in solitary confinement. The prison authorities weaponize other prisoners as biological agents, and they'll send somebody in who has tuberculosis or is running a fever, and then Navalny will get sick, and then the prison will deny him civilian medical care. And it is just a chain of torture. But Navalny is a very strong guy, and I think if anyone can survive it, it's him. And I really hope he is able to get through what he's enduring so he can see our movie one day, because, of course, he hasn't seen the film.
Well, I want to say thank you very much for being a guest on Westdoc. I really appreciate your taking the time, and I wish you the best of luck in the upcoming Academy Awards ceremonies.
Thanks, Chuck. I really appreciate it.